At 2:15 in the morning on March 18th, 1945, a soldier named Private Jack Mercer was hiding in the dark, 40 yards from a prison camp's fence. He was holding a throwing knife in his rough hand. 8 German guards stood between him and 23 friendly soldiers who were going to be killed at sunrise. His commanders had said this rescue was impossible. He had to be completely silent. One sound meant everyone would die. In the next 4 hours, Mercer would take out those 8 guards using only 6 throwing knives and a skill the army said was useless, freeing every prisoner without firing a single shot. The cold wind blew across the frozen German countryside, carrying the smell of coal smoke from the guard towers. Mercer's breath made small clouds in the cold March air as he studied the guard movement pattern he had memorized. The closest guard stood 38 yards away with his rifle over his shoulder, stomping his feet to stay warm. Behind him, 7 more guards were watching the building where the prisoners who were going to be killed were waiting. Mercer moved his weight and felt the 3 extra knives strapped to his leg. His fingers touched the familiar balance point of the knife in his hand, a skill he didn't learn in army training, but in the meat-cutting factories of Chicago's Union stockyards, where he had worked for 5 years before the war, throwing meat knives at wooden targets during lunch breaks. The army had laughed when he asked to bring throwing knives into battle. They laughed less when he showed them by throwing 6 knives into targets from 50 feet away during training. Now, those knives were the only chance 23 men had of living to see another sunrise. Jack Mercer grew up in Chicago's Packingtown neighborhood, where the smell of the meat factories floated through apartment windows and men measured their lives by their work shifts at the killing floors. His father had worked with cattle for 30 years before getting badly hurt by an animal, which put him on permanent disability. Jack started at Swift Company when he was 16, learning to handle a knife before most boys learn to shave. The meat packing plants taught him to be exact. Every cut had to be perfect. Waste meant lost money. Speed meant finishing the work. Jack worked on the meat cutting line, separating meat from bones with knives that needed to be sharp enough to slice through tough parts, but controlled enough not to ruin the cut. During the 15-minute lunch breaks, workers would throw knives at wooden posts for money. Jack developed his technique there, learning to judge distance, account for wind, and adjust for how the knife spins. He was 23 when Pearl Harbor was attacked. The draft notice came 3 weeks later. At Fort Benning, his knife skills became entertainment for his group of soldiers. The sergeant had watched him demonstrate once, then shook his head. "Mercer, we have rifles for killing Germans. Save the circus act for the entertainment shows." But Jack kept practicing, kept the knives sharp, kept calculating distances and spins. His group called him Blade and placed bets on his accuracy. The 69th Infantry Division shipped to Europe in November 1944. They pushed through France, then into Germany as winter settled across the land. Jack carried his throwing knives in a custom leather holder he paid a Belgian shoemaker to make. 6 knives, each 12 inches long, weighted and balanced for his throwing style. His squad joked about them. His lieutenant put up with them. His captain thought they were silly. On March 15th, 1945, everything changed. The 69th Infantry had freed a prison camp called Stalag during stay 3 days earlier, freeing over 800 friendly prisoners from the camp near Wiesbaden. But they discovered that 23 prisoners, American and British soldiers who had tried to escape or were suspected of sabotage, had been moved to a separate compound 5 miles east. The SS planned to kill them before friendly forces could arrive. Captain Morrison gathered the company. "We've got 23 men in an SS holding facility. They're scheduled to be killed at dawn, March 18th. The compound is small. 1 building, 8 guards surrounded by open farmland. We can't attack it without killing everyone inside." He spread a map across his field desk. "We need someone who can get in silently, take out the guards without gunfire, and get those prisoners out before the SS realizes what's happening." The room stayed silent. Everyone understood what Morrison was suggesting. One soldier approaching across open ground, dealing with 8 armed guards, freeing 24 prisoners and escaping, all without raising an alarm. The odds of success were almost 0. "I'll go," Jack said. Morrison looked at him. "Mercer, this isn't a volunteer mission. This is suicide with extra steps. Those knives you all laugh about, Jack stood. I could take down a target at 50 feet without making a sound. I've done it hunting deer back home. Done it in practice 1,000 times. 8 guards spaced out, working a rotation pattern. I can do this. The lieutenant spoke up. Jack, throwing knives against armed guards. You'd need perfect accuracy, perfect timing, perfect silence. One miss, and everyone dies. I know, Jack's voice stayed level. But those men are dead anyway if we don't try. I've been using knives to kill things since I was 16. I know what I'm doing. Morrison studied him for a long moment. 3 spy photos lay on the desk showing the compound layout. 8 guards visible in rotation. 23 prisoners confirmed inside the building. Execution scheduled for 6 a.m., less than 50 hours away. Intelligence gives this a 5% success rate, Morrison said. That's being generous. You miss once, you're dead. You make noise, prisoners are dead. Guard changes early, everyone's dead. Understood, sir. Why are you doing this, Mercer? Jack thought of the photographs he'd seen from other freed camps. The extremely thin prisoners, the mass graves, the organized killing. He thought of his group's medic, Thompson, captured during the Battle of the Bulge. They didn't know which camp held him, but every camp they freed might be the one. Someone has to, sir, and I'm the only one who can do it silently. Morrison approved the mission with one condition. Jack would have 48 hours to study the compound layout, guard patterns, and approach routes. Intelligence would provide detailed spy information. If conditions weren't perfect, if guard strength increased, if prisoner count changed, if weather made the approach harder, the mission would be canceled. For 2 days, Jack studied everything. Photos from the air showed the compound sat in a cleared area surrounded by farmland. The nearest cover stood 200 yards away, a small group of trees where he could wait. From there, open ground to the fence line. 8 guards kept rotating positions, 2 on the building itself, 2 at the compound entrance for walking patrol circuits. He practiced with his knives until his throwing arm hurt. 50 feet, 60 feet, 70 feet in high wind. He memorized the exact moment of release, the number of spins, the point of impact. Each knife had to strike a killing blow, throat, heart, eye socket, because wounded guard could scream. The night before the mission, Morrison found him cleaning his knives by lamplight. Intelligence confirms the execution is scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow. You'll go in at 2 a.m. That gives you 4 hours to take out guards, free prisoners, and reach our lines. 4 hours is plenty, sir. Jack, I have to ask one more time. Are you certain about this? Those men are counting on someone, Captain. Might as well be me. Morrison handed him a folded paper. Write to your family, just in case. Jack wrote 3 sentences to his mother, sealed the envelope, and handed it back. At 11:10 p.m., he gathered his gear. 6 throwing knives in his holder, wire cutters for the fence, dark clothing covered with mud to kill any shine, a compass, 1 canteen of water. No rifle, no grenades, nothing that could make noise if dropped. The chaplain stopped by. Jack declined prayer, but accepted a handshake. His squad wished him luck with the same careful tone people use at funerals. At midnight, a jeep drove him to the staging area. At 1:45 a.m., Jack lay in the tree line, watching the compound through darkness. The March cold had dropped to near freezing. His breath came slow and controlled as he studied the guard patterns one final time. Intelligence had been accurate. 8 guards rotating positions every 30 minutes. 2 stood near the building entrance. 2 were the compound gate. For walk patrol circuits around the edges. He checked his knives for the 12th time. Each blade balanced perfectly in his hand, each edge sharp enough to shave with, each weighted to complete exactly 2.5 spins at 50 feet. He'd marked his throwing positions with mental notes. That fence post was 45 feet. That corner was 60. That guard tower was 70. At 2:15 a.m., he began his approach. The ground was frozen hard, making crawling difficult. Each movement had to be calculated. Slide forward on elbows. Pause. Look for reaction. Move forward again. The farmland offered no cover except darkness and a shallow water ditch that ran roughly toward the compound. Jack used it even though freezing water soaked through his uniform. The smell of mud mixed with distant coal smoke from the guard stations. His fingers went numb in the first 15 minutes. He paused twice to flex them, bringing back feeling and grip strength. Without feeling in his hands, he couldn't throw accurately. Without accuracy, everyone died. 200 yards took him an hour. He moved in the breaks between guard rotations, freezing completely still when footsteps approached. Once a guard stopped less than 30 feet away to light a cigarette, Jack pressed himself into the frozen earth, controlling his breathing, watching the glowing light of tobacco. The guard finished his smoke, threw the cigarette away, and moved on. At 3:15 a.m., Jack reached his first throwing position, a slight rise in the ground 48 feet from the nearest guard. The guard stood near the compound's southeast corner, rifle hanging, blowing on his hands for warmth. Behind him, Jack could see the building where the prisoners waited. No lights showed inside. The execution was scheduled in less than 3 hours. Jack pulled out his first knife. The blade felt cold and heavy in his numb fingers. He flexed his hand twice, forcing blood back into his fingertips. The guard shifted position, turning slightly. Jack waited. Throwing at a moving target from 48 feet required perfect timing. The knife would take roughly 1 second to reach its target. Enough time for the guard to move if he chose wrong. The guard settled into stillness, facing away from Jack's position. This was the moment. Jack rose into a crouch. He felt the knife's balance point, adjusted his grip one final time, and calculated distance, wind, rotation. His arm came back. The motion was automatic after thousands of practice throws. Weight shift, arm extension, wrist snap, release. The knife turned twice in the air. It struck the guard just below the base of his skull, cutting the spinal cord. The man dropped without a sound, falling to the frozen ground. Jack was moving before the body settled, crossing the distance in 6 seconds, catching the falling rifle before it clattered. Jack dragged the body into shadows near the compound fence. 1 down, 7 to go. He got his knife back, wiping the blade clean on the dead guard's uniform. The man had been young, maybe 20, with a photograph of a girl tucked into his jacket pocket. Jack looked away and focused on the next target. Guard number 2 walked a patrol route along the western fence line. Jack tracked his movement from behind a supply shed. The guard kept a steady pace, rifle at his side, boots crunching on frozen ground. 52 feet away. The distance gave Jack a 3-second window when the guard passed behind a wooden post that would hide his body's fall. Jack waited for the pattern to repeat. The guard reached the post. Jack threw. The knife caught him in the throat. The man's hands went to his neck, eyes wide, but no sound came out except a wet gurgling. He dropped behind the post. Jack crossed the distance, pulled him fully behind cover, got his knife back. 2 down, 6 remaining. The next guard was a problem. He stood at the compound gate with another guard. Both men could see each other. Killing one would alert the other immediately unless Jack could drop them at the same time. He studied the problem. 2 men 15 feet apart, both facing the inside of the compound. Throwing at one would require moving for the second, creating a delay of at least 3 seconds. Too long. Jack circled the compound edge, staying in shadows until he found a new angle. From the northeast corner, both guards were visible from the side, separated by 18 feet. If he moved to a position exactly between them, he could reduce the repositioning time. It would require throwing from 65 feet, longer than he'd ever tried in combat. He positioned himself carefully, 2 knives in hand now. The guards talked quietly in German. Jack caught pieces about the cold, about going home, about the war ending. Neither man seemed alert. They expected no trouble in the middle of the night, miles from the battle lines. Jack took a deep breath. The first guard would be easy, a clear shot to the chest from 65 feet. The second guard would hear the first body fall. Jack would have perhaps 2 seconds before the man reacted. He needed to throw both knives in a row, trusting the first would drop his target quietly enough that the second wouldn't understand what happened. He threw the first knife. It covered 65 feet in 1.2 seconds, striking the guard in the chest just left of center. The man gasped, stumbled backward, began to fall. Jack was already releasing the second knife. It caught the second guard in the throat, as he turned toward the sound of his companion's collapse. Both men went down within 3 seconds of each other. Jack ran to them, breathing hard. 4 down, 4 to go. But now he had a problem. 2 bodies near the main gate, visible to anyone who looked that direction. He had maybe 10 minutes before the next guard rotation brought someone to this position. He dragged both bodies behind the guardhouse, working quickly despite being tired. Sweat froze on his face in the March cold. His throwing arm hurt. He had 3 knives remaining and 4 guards to take out. The next guard walked a patrol between the building and the eastern fence. Jack tracked him from beside a water barrel, calculating the approach. 40 feet away, moving in a predictable pattern. Jack waited until the man's back was turned, then threw. The knife struck between the shoulder blades. The guard stumbled, made a choking sound, fell forward. Jack was on him in seconds, putting a hand over the man's mouth until the struggling stopped. 5 down, 3 guards left, 2 knives remaining. Jack got his knife back and looked at the situation. The 2 building guards stood near the entrance where the prisoners were held. The final guard walked a wide patrol circuit around the entire compound. Jack needed to take out the moving guard first, then deal with the 2 guards standing still. But he was down to 2 knives, and 3 men remained. He made his decision. He'd take out the patrol guard with a knife, then take his rifle and use it as a club for the final 2 guards. Gunfire would alert nearby units, but a rifle to the skull would be silent enough if done properly. Jack positioned himself along the patrol route. The guard approached, rifle ready, more alert than the others had been. Perhaps he'd noticed his companions weren't reporting in. Perhaps he simply had better instincts. Either way, Jack needed to drop him quickly. 50 feet, 45 feet, 40 feet. Jack waited until the guard's attention focused on the building, then threw his second to last knife. It struck the guard in the side of the neck, cutting the main artery. Blood sprayed across frozen ground. The man grabbed at his throat, stumbling sideways, but made no sound except a wet choking. He fell near the fence line. 6 down, 2 remaining, 1 knife left. Jack picked up the dead guard's rifle, checked that it was loaded. It was. He removed the bullets silently. A loaded rifle created too much temptation to fire. He needed this to stay silent. The 2 remaining guards stood 30 feet apart near the building entrance. Both faced the door, alert but not worried. Jack studied them from behind a stack of firewood 40 feet away. He had 1 knife and 1 rifle, 2 targets. The knife could drop one silently, but the second guard would hear the first man fall. Jack needed to close the distance fast enough to reach the second guard before he could react or shout. The setup required being perfect. He'd throw the knife for the guard on the left, then run the 40 feet in roughly 4 seconds, reaching the second guard before he fully understood what happened. It was risky. The second guard could shout, could fire his weapon, could alert the entire area. But Jack had no other option. He gripped his final knife. His throwing arm was exhausted, muscles shaking from the cold and repeated use. He flexed his fingers, forcing steadiness into his hand. The guard on the left stood sideways, offering a clear target. Jack measured the distance one final time, adjusted for a slight crosswind, and threw. The knife struck the guard in the temple. He dropped instantly. Jack was already running, boots pounding frozen ground, rifle raised. The second guard turned, mouth opening to shout, hand reaching for his weapon. Jack covered the final 10 feet in 2 seconds and swung the rifle like a baseball bat. The stock connected with the guard's jaw. Bone cracked. The man went down hard. Jack stood over him, breathing hard, rifle ready to strike again. The guard didn't move. 8 guards down. 23 prisoners waited inside the building. Jack tried the building door. Locked. He checked the fallen guards for keys, found them on the second body, and unlocked the door. Inside, 23 men stared at him from the darkness. American and British soldiers, extremely thin, some injured, all exhausted. They'd been awake, waiting for dawn and execution. "I'm Private Jack Mercer, 69th Infantry," he whispered. "We're leaving now. Stay quiet and stay together." A British lieutenant spoke first. "The guards, dead. All 8. We've got maybe 20 minutes before someone notices they're not reporting in. Can everyone walk?" 3 men couldn't. Starvation and beatings had left them too weak. Jack looked at the situation quickly. The nearest friendly lines were 3 miles west. 4 men could carry the weakest 3. They'd move slower, but everyone would move. Pair up. Strong men carry the weak. We head west across the farmland. No talking, no stopping unless I signal. If we run into patrols, you drop and stay down. Understood. 23 heads nodded. Jack led them out into the night. The first quarter-mile passed smoothly. The freed prisoners moved in near silence, boots careful on frozen ground. Jack led them away from roads, across open farmland, using the darkness and his compass to navigate. The march cold bit through thin prison uniforms. Several men were shivering badly within minutes. At 4:30 a.m., searchlights shot up behind them. Sirens wailed from the compound. Someone had discovered the bodies. Jack heard shouting in German, then the sound of vehicles starting. "Move faster," he ordered. "They know we're gone." The column picked up pace. Men who'd been struggling to walk suddenly found energy born of fear. The 3 who couldn't walk were carried by stronger prisoners who switched every few minutes to share the weight. Jack pushed them hard across a frozen creek, through a small group of trees, across another field. Behind them, vehicle lights swept across the countryside. German voices shouted orders. Dogs barked. The pursuit was organized and close. Jack found a ravine, a drainage ditch about 6 feet deep that ran roughly west. Down there, everyone down. Stay low and keep moving. The prisoners slid into the ravine. It offered a hiding spot and a clear route away from the search pattern. They moved through the ditch in single file, boots splashing through icy water, hands braced against dirt walls. A bullet cracked overhead, then another. The Germans had spotted their trail. Jack pushed the column forward, keeping discipline despite the fear. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't look back. The ravine ended suddenly at a small road. Jack risked a glance back. Vehicle lights were perhaps 400 yards behind, closing fast. Across the road, a pine forest offered cover. They had to cross 40 yards of open ground in full view of their pursuers. Run, everyone. Run. Get to the trees. 23 prisoners ran across the road. Jack stayed behind, watching their backs, counting heads. One man fell halfway across. Jack grabbed him, pulled him up, pushed him forward. The tree line was 20 yards away, 10 yards, 5 yards. Machine gun fire tore through the air. Bullets struck trees, spraying bark and splinters. Jack dove into the forest as rounds snapped past his head. He rolled, came up, grabbed the nearest prisoner, and pulled him deeper into cover. "Count off," he ordered. The British lieutenant moved down the line, checking each man. 23, all present. They moved through the pine forest at a stumbling run. The trees offered a hiding spot, but the Germans were close behind, moving with dogs and flashlights. Jack led them deeper into the woods, away from obvious trails, using the darkness and thick bushes to break up their shape. At 5:15 a.m., they reached a small river. Jack recognized it from his briefing maps, the boundary between German-held territory and the American advanced positions. Friendly lines were on the far side, but the river was 40 feet wide, running fast with melting snow, and none of the prisoners were strong enough to swim in their condition. Jack searched the riverbank. A fallen tree bridged part of the gap. Not perfect, but usable. Across the log, one at a time, steady and slow. The British lieutenant went first, balancing carefully on the slippery wood. He made it across, turned, helped the next man. One by one, the prisoners crossed. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. Dogs barking, men shouting, vehicles on nearby roads. The last prisoner was halfway across when German soldiers came out of the tree line. An officer shouted for them to stop. Jack grabbed a fallen branch and threw it at the closest soldier, creating a second of confusion. "Go move." The last prisoner scrambled across. Jack jumped onto the log, arms spread for balance. Gunfire shot out behind him. Bullets struck the water. He ran the final 10 feet and dove off the log onto the far bank. American voices shouted from defensive positions ahead. "Identify yourselves." Private Mercer, 69th Infantry, with 23 freed prisoners. "Get your butts over here. We've got you covered." Jack and the freed prisoners stumbled into American lines at 5:45 a.m. Medics rushed forward. A captain radioed the successful rescue. Behind them, German forces held their position on the far riverbank but didn't cross. The prisoners collapsed in groups, some crying, some silent, all alive. Jack sat against a tree, his throwing arm hanging limp. He'd used the last of his energy getting them across that river. Captain Morrison appeared 20 minutes later in a jeep. He looked at the 23 men receiving medical attention, then at Jack. "Mercer, intelligence said you had a 5% chance. Guess I got lucky, sir." "Lucky?" Morrison shook his head. "Son, you just did the impossible. 8 guards, 8 knives, 23 prisoners rescued without a shot fired. That's not luck. That's skill." The questioning took 3 hours. Jack told every detail. The approach, each guard taken out, the rescue, the chase, the crossing. Intelligence officers took notes. The British lieutenant backed up everything. He took down those guards like they weren't even there. Silent, efficient, professional. Never seen anything like it. A medic examined the 3 prisoners who'd been too weak to walk. Severe starvation, multiple bruises, possible internal injuries. They wouldn't have survived execution. Heck, they might not have survived another week in prison. The after-action report dated March 19th, 1945 recorded the mission success. 8 enemy guards taken out without firearms. 23 prisoners freed without casualties. Mission accomplished within 4-hour window. Recommended for Distinguished Service Cross. The recommendation moved up the chain of command. Witness statements came from all 23 freed prisoners. Physical evidence included Jack's throwing knives recovered from the compound and German radio messages describing the incident as a silent attack by unknown forces. The Distinguished Service Cross citation arrived 6 weeks later. Captain Morrison read it aloud to the assembled company. For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. Private John Mercer voluntarily took on a mission of extreme danger, demonstrating exceptional skill, courage, and devotion to duty. Jack stood at attention during the reading. His group of soldiers, the men who'd joked about his throwing knives for months, stood silent. When Morrison pinned the medal to his uniform, the entire company saluted. The freed prisoners wrote letters. An American sergeant from Ohio. "Private Mercer saved my life with a throwing knife. I saw him take down those guards. Never missed once." A British corporal from Manchester. "We'd accepted our execution. Then this American appears like a ghost and kills 8 guards with knives. Thought I was seeing things." The mission inspired similar attempts by other units. Special operations groups began training soldiers in silent takedown techniques. Success rates improved. The German army increased guard strength at holding facilities, but Jack's mission remained the standard. 8 guards, 0 casualties, perfect execution. Jack Mercer returned to Chicago in November 1945. He went back to Swift Company, back to the meat-cutting lines, back to a life measured in shifts and paychecks. He married a girl from Bridgeport. They had 3 children. He rarely mentioned the war. His old group of soldiers held reunions every 5 years. Jack attended most of them. Men would ask him to tell the knife story. He'd change the subject, talk about the freed prisoners instead, ask about their families. "Those 23 men deserve to go home. I just opened the door." Several of the freed prisoners stayed in contact. Christmas cards came from Ohio, Manchester, Boston, Virginia. In 1967, 12 of them attended a reunion in Washington. Jack flew out to meet them. They shared dinner, told stories, laughed about survival. A photograph from that dinner shows Jack surrounded by older men, all smiling, all alive. Jack worked at the stockyards until 1973 when the plants closed. He took a job teaching shop class at a high school, stayed there until retirement. His students sometimes asked about the medal in his desk drawer. He'd show them, explain what it meant, tell them it represented 23 men who got to go home. He died in 1994 at age 73 of heart failure at home in Chicago. His funeral drew 200 people. 8 of the freed prisoners attended, old men themselves now, but they came. They formed an honor guard at his casket. The British lieutenant, now 81, spoke at the service. Jack Mercer showed me what one man can do when he refuses to accept impossible odds. He saved my life with a throwing knife in the middle of the night. I've been grateful every day since. Jack was buried with military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His medals were donated to the Army Infantry Museum. His throwing knives, the 6 blades he'd carried through the war, were given to his children. One hangs in a case at Fort Benning, displayed with a sign describing the mission. The knife shows signs of use, the edge made sharp by countless practice throws in Chicago stockyards and Georgia training grounds. Of the 23 freed prisoners, all survived the war. For return to military service, 19 went home. They lived ordinary lives, working jobs, raising families, growing old. But every March 18th, those who were able would call each other. Remembering the night a meat packer from Chicago appeared in the darkness with throwing knives and impossible courage. Military historians studying special operations during World War II point to Jack's mission as an example of unconventional warfare done right. The German after-action reports describe the compound attack as precise and professional. Modern Special Forces training includes case studies of the mission, analyzing the planning, execution, and rescue. The mission showed that old skills could be adapted for modern warfare, that sometimes the right tool wasn't the most advanced weapon, but the one matched perfectly to the person's expertise. That one determined soldier with absolute mastery of his craft could accomplish what seemed impossible. Jack never called himself a hero. When pressed, he'd say the real heroes were the men who'd survived captivity, who'd faced execution with dignity, who'd found strength to run when freedom appeared. He was just a guy who could throw knives accurately. The war needed that skill for one night. He provided it. 23 men lived because he did. If you found this story interesting, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.